Just a few minutes without oxygen at birth left Becky with brain damage. In 1974, there weren't many options for babies such as Becky. Her parents placed her in an institution, a nursing home. On her 10th birthday, having lived all of her life there, Becky weighed all of 20 pounds. This is Becky today, a year and a half after getting out of the nursing home. She weighs twice the amount she did the day she left there. What happened between then and now is the story of Becky's coming out. The brain damage left Becky with cerebral palsy. When she was admitted to the nursing home, she was thought to be blind, deaf, and profoundly mentally retarded as well. It turns out she's none of those things. Becky seems to have a way of contradicting the conclusions authorities make about her.
I know she wasn't expected to survive birth, but she did, and I know she wasn't expected to, I suspect she wasn't expected to survive infancy, but she did. At some point in time, I think people have to say whether or not she's expected to survive is not the issue. The issue is that during the amount of time she does survive, we've got to make that time meaningful quality time.
The quality of time for children in nursing homes has concerned many people. Linda Till is one of them. 9 years ago, she began running infant stimulation programs in the homes. Then she came across Becky.
Becky decided that I was there for her, forget the other kids. I mean, as far as she was concerned, it was pretty obvious.
The nursing home Becky lived in is in Keswick, north of Toronto. We weren't allowed to take pictures of conditions in the home now, but Linda Till recalls what they were like when she first visited the homes throughout Ontario. There wasn't much to choose between them.
What you saw were a large number of steel cribs lined up in rooms. There were, at the time when I went in, they had started taking the kids out for periods of time during the day, out of their beds for periods of time during the day. And there were rubber mats on the floor, but there wasn't anything else in the room, so they were just all laying down on these mats on the floor, just sort of there. You see it in the eyes. You see it in facial expressions. The lack of expression, literally. The withdrawal and the lethargy that comes about without that emotional support that kids need.
Linda began to offer her support to Becky, making regular visits to the nursing home, and finally, permission to take her out on weekends. Linda's commitment to Becky was backed by her training and her expertise. Her husband, King, had to start from square one.
There we go. When she first came here, when I first became involved with her, I was a little skeptical. I had really never been involved with someone who had a handicap, but just an amazing, amazing child.
And it's time to have a bounce.
Even with all her disabilities and the bad time she's had, she's always got a smile for somebody. And when she gets to know you, she's just a bubbly little, effervescent little girl.
Oh, are you getting tired?
She would come here on a Friday night, and then we'd take her home on a Sunday night. So over the years, she became just like a member of the family. And I think one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is take her back there.
So they began to search for ways to keep Becky. But as King and Linda Till set about trying to get legal custody of Becky, they became increasingly concerned about her health. They kept pressing the nursing home and finally succeeded in getting her to the hospital for sick children. Here, Becky saw a surgeon and a nutritionist. The nutritionist was Dr. Stanley Zlotkin.
Well, she was extremely malnourished. She was a 10-year-old girl weighing somewhere around 20 to 22 pounds, if you can imagine that. So she was literally skin and bones and nothing else. So I think it was that she was simply extremely difficult to feed, and the folks looking after her were simply unable to get in enough nutrients to get her to grow.
When they ever did make an effort to get food into her, most of it spilled all over. She was difficult to hold. They couldn't get it into her. She'd choke, she'd gag, she'd this, she'd that. And there was no time, no matter the inclination of any of the staff people there.
Such a rascal.
One of the reasons Becky had difficulty eating is that she developed a hiatus hernia while at the nursing home. The surgery she had after leaving repaired it and corrected other digestive problems. Paula Jourdain is the administrator of Jan Lynn.
If you were looking after that child, why didn't you take her?
Any medical care that was provided to Becky was provided based on the medical recommendations of our physician.
Paula Jourdain's father purchased the home 6 years ago. Conditions improved under their management, but there are still many questions about the care Becky received.
The whole time Becky was here, she was under detailed medical supervision, and her progress was being reviewed on a quarterly basis by our advisory physician.
And you were satisfied? You didn't wonder why a child who was 10 years old weighed 20 pounds?
In a child that has multiple handicaps, it's not uncommon for them to have lower weight gain than normal individuals.
So you were satisfied?
We felt that the options, the alternatives facing Becky were as risky as her low weight gain was.
Surgery may have been risky, but according to Dr. Zlotkin, the risk of being extremely malnourished was critical for Becky.
It's kind of surprising that she would have gone on as long as she did in her rather malnourished state, because there's no question that with extreme malnutrition, among other things, she is extremely susceptible to infection, and thus children like Becky would die likely of complications.
Instead, with surgery and the care she's received over the last year and a half, Becky's gone from wearing size 2 clothes to size 6X. Becky's body lacked food. Becky's life lacked some of the things kids love most. But the Tills brought Becky home with them last year, and now Becky is having the time of her life.
With Becky, she would do anything that we asked her in the water. The last few times I worked with her, you could actually see the head from this floppy position was actually starting to lift up.
1, 2, 3, Cassie, jump. 1, 2, 3, Becky. Good girl, Becky. 1, 2, 3, Becky.
When Linda came along, she said, "My daughter's handicapped. Would you take her?" And Maria and I just looked at each other and went, "Oh, well, yes, certainly." Because really, we couldn't in our hearts say no.
We just took her like anybody else. That's the way we have treated her all along, you know, just one of the crowd, one of the gang.
Becky's even going to university, to a summer camp designed for all children.
There, look. Perfect fit. Come on, Becky. I'll help her. Just try to write your name.
Me and this guy, Tony, we take care of her. And at first, I was nervous because I wasn't used to something like that. But then after I got to know her well, she's nice. I like her.
When I first met her at 3, she had not yet at that point even smiled. The staff at the time were saying, "Do you think she'll ever learn to smile?" And I'm saying, well, she's got to have something to smile for.
What do you like best about Becky?
That she laughs a lot.
Give Daddy a big hug.
Becky's story is extraordinary, but it isn't unique. There are hundreds of children who have lived their lives in nursing homes. What makes Becky's story different is that it began in a nursing home, but it didn't end there.
Her neighborhood school. 4 years later, that battle is still being waged with the York Region School Board. Becky was, however, accepted at the local Catholic school, and we went to see if Becky belongs.
We're going to be doing some more microscope work today.
Becky just started science class this semester, but with the help of Marley Russell, her full-time education assistant at Newmarket's Sacred Heart School, Becky has become an active academic and social participant.
If there's one thing that I've learned over the last 2.5 years working with Becky, is that to underestimate her is ultimately to isolate her. And every day that I've worked with her, she has surprised me at what she's able to accomplish.
Becky has been astounding people all her life. In 1974, there weren't many options for multi-handicapped children. Becky's parents placed her in a nursing home. She spent the first decade of her life in this crib. At 10 years old, she weighed 22 pounds and wasn't expected to live. Then came the day Becky touched the heart of a community worker. So much so that Linda and King Till made her part of their family. Becky flourished. With an undiagnosed eating problem treated at the hospital for sick children, she more than doubled in size. Interaction with other children at camp, water skiing, and just clowning around motivated her to ask about school. That's when the Tills' battle began. While the majority of Ontario school boards are integrating special education students, the York Region School Board exercised its right to demand Becky attend segregated classes, saying Becky would slow other students down. Becky's classmate, Samantha Carmichael, says that's absurd.
No, it doesn't bring down the level of the class at all because Becky's at the same level that we are.
No matter what kind of class Becky was in, she would require a one-on-one assistant, so costs to the board would be the same. The assistant allows teachers to devote time to other students, and Mark Kierstead says it's up to educators to ensure all students reach their full potential.
She knew where she was at and she had the capabilities. And the students related to her exceedingly well.
With a little help from her many friends, Becky's daily needs are met. Last term, Becky took her first exam, geography, 80%. The Human Rights Commission is expected to hear Becky's case against the York Region School Board this fall, and the province plans to introduce new legislation concerning special education integration next spring.
Amazing. Nice story. Thank you very much. Nice story.
A good friend of mine has CP, has cerebral palsy, and writes for the Edmonton Journal. He's a sports writer, and tomorrow he'll be writing about Jack Morris's 20th victory of the season. Because it's going to happen. You have that from the old El Predicto.
Many children with challenging needs have experienced lifestyles that differ greatly from those of their non-disabled peers. Sometimes these life experiences entailed exclusion from the whole of society through institutionalization, and sometimes exclusion from specific activities that are typically seen as accessible by right to those who are not labeled. Those experiences have revealed a significant fact, that segregation begets segregation. A life separate from others at any point in a child's life leads to a life separate from others as an adult. A life separate from others equals loneliness and despair. Those who have come to understand this have also come to a determined conclusion. Never again can we allow our children to experience segregation.
Paula Jourdain runs the home Becky grew up in. Her father owns Jan Lynn.
I think my goals are synonymous with the home's goals, and that is to achieve the maximum potential for each child, whatever that potential is.
Would you like to see a point in time where institutions don't play a role?
I think that in the ideal situation, yes, we'd be in all group home settings or foster care settings.
And would you actively work towards getting this institution shut down?
I think that that's something that is beyond the mandate of our company.
18 years ago, getting rid of institutions wasn't Flora Nicholson's mandate either. In fact, she'd just finished setting up Rygel Nursing Home. Then someone told her she was doing it all wrong.
I swallowed my pride and said, okay, show me another way. And that was it.
Dr. Joe Jacobs is a pediatrician at the McMaster Medical Center. He's watched many of the children make the transition from institution to a home of their own.
Some of the children who are in here, labeled correctly if you want, as severely retarded, go out into the apartments, and the neighbors then say, but of course these aren't retarded. Why? Because they see them responding, and because they know them, they cease to allocate to them labels like severely retarded, which really doesn't look at a human being. They see children.
After a lengthy and unsuccessful period of determined effort to secure Becky's right to access an age-appropriate class in her neighborhood school,
The fight of necessity intensified. The following are a series of news clips detailing the struggle that ensued.
Parents of a 15-year-old girl are fighting to get their daughter into school. The school won't take her because she has cerebral palsy. For Becky Till, it's yet another obstacle to overcome. CBC at 6 first showed Becky's story 4 years ago. The story of a child expected to die in a nursing home where she had spent her entire life. As Patricia Chu reports, Becky is still battling the odds.
Do you think she should be going to school with you guys?
Yeah. Linda Till knows the futility of what she's about to do. She's been fighting the York Region Public School Board for 4.5 years. The board says her daughter Becky belongs in a special education classroom with other handicapped children. Till wants Becky here in a regular class. Not everyone in the small town of Sharon is on her side.
Don't you really think you're taking it to the wrong place? You definitely are. You interrupt the classrooms and everything else.
Hi, Becky.
Till says she's come to a dead end. She's hoping confrontation will work where all else has failed.
We've made it clear from square one that we are seeking an environment where the children speak, where the children can walk and come up to her and initiate interaction.
We don't have a class for Becky here, but she is on a class list at another school.
The school area superintendent is brought in. Once again, he offers Becky a place in a special education class. Once again, the Tills refuse.
The program of a regular class is not designed to handle students with handicaps as severe as Becky has, with her inability to communicate, with her inability to walk or move about, and with her inability to be toilet trained at this stage.
She's quite capable of interacting with other people. She's fully toilet trained. I don't know what the hell he's trying to do, but it certainly hasn't anything to do with looking at the child. What he's doing is he's describing to you the kind of child in general that's typically labeled multi-handicapped. He's not talking about Becky.
Today, a dozen or more friends, including Becky's babysitter, came to lend their support.
I see just a regular kid. And when her friends ask, they say, why can't Becky come to school with me? Why does she have to go to a different school? We go to Girl Guides with Becky, why can't we go to school with her? You know, and we say, well, it's politics, you know.
People are always saying in cases like this that people like Becky can never come to this school because the kids won't accept them. What they're really saying is that they don't accept them.
The doors are still closed to Becky, but the fight is not over. Linda says she'll teach Becky on the school lawn if she has to, for as long as she has to, until the board realizes Becky won't go away. For CBC News, I'm Patricia Chu in Sharon, Ontario.
The commission will hear the appeal but has not set a date. Meanwhile, Linda Till is teaching Becky herself on the school grounds.
We're going to stay out where people can see that indeed she's being denied access to this school. We're going to teach her to the best of our abilities.
Education Ministry officials said today they can't interfere with the board's refusal to admit Becky to Sharon Public School.
The York Board of Education is continuing. Becky Till's parents have been trying to have their daughter put in a regular classroom at Sharon Public School for the past 4 years. The board says she belongs in a special classroom. Michelle Rail reports.
15-year-old Becky Till was taking classes outside school today with the help of friends. For the second day in a row, officials at the Sharon Public School have refused to let Becky's parents register her in a grade 8 class. Becky has cerebral palsy. The York Region Board of Education says she needs a special education class that isn't offered in Sharon. Becky's parents say she's capable of being integrated into a regular class.
She has a right to go to the neighborhood school and to be supported in her neighborhood school. She has extra challenges, and those challenges will need additional supports, but I don't think that it's an insurmountable challenge for a board to consider, and I do know there are boards in numbers of other areas that are doing it.
Becky was greeted warmly by the children at recess this morning. The principal says the school is a welcoming place, but it can't answer Becky's needs.
She can be integrated for social activities, but as far as the academic program goes, I believe the best place for her is in a multi-handicap class and not in a grade 8 class.
Becky was enrolled for 8 months in a special education class at this school a few miles down the road. But her parents felt she was too segregated from the rest of the students, and they wanted her back in the mainstream. The York Region Board of Education spends 20% of its budget on the 12% of its students who are exceptional. There are 40 students with multiple handicaps who do attend regular classes, but they don't need teachers' aides to help them. And since Becky requires assistance, she doesn't qualify.
Well, our concern in a regular classroom with a youngster like Becky is that it extends the demands that the regular teacher would have to address. She has difficulties in the area of communication. She has very little expressive language, and as far as we can determine, limited receptive language as well.
This educational consultant helps school boards across the U.S. and Canada with integration programs. She says this board hasn't given Becky a chance to show what she's capable of.
There are kids all over Ontario in wheelchairs. There are kids with Down syndrome, there are kids with cerebral palsy being welcomed in wonderful school boards in Ontario. This is a shameful situation here. I mean, the word that comes to mind is disgusting.
The Tills vow that their battle to have Becky placed at Sharon Public School will continue. They've also taken their case to the Human Rights Commission. In Sharon, Michelle Rayo, Total News.
Her mother is holding classes outside of Sharon Public School until she's allowed to register.
This page has some symbols.
Meanwhile, Bob Cressman, director of York Region School Board, met inside the school with the principal. Will Becky still not be allowed to go to the school?
That's correct.
Is there any way that that decision will be changed?
No.
The school board believes Becky's needs would best be met in a special education class with a 3-to-1 student-teacher ratio. Her parents want her to attend regular school, but with a full-time helper.
The presence of Becky will simply enhance the education of the other children. It will give them the opportunity to learn the values of including children like Becky.
Becky's mom is determined to send her child to regular school rather than special education classes, and on Monday she's going to be taking her case to the York Region Public School Trustees, hoping for some political change. At Sharon Public School, I'm Teresa Roncon for Citywide.
It's all been entirely done legally and professionally.
What about morally?
And morally.
The school board maintains Becky should be schooled in a nearby facility for the physically challenged. Linda Till says her daughter would be much better served, assisted by a personal aide in an environment of able-bodied kids. Becky's morning lessons are over. They're heading home for lunch now. But Becky and her mother say they'll be at the board offices Monday morning, trying to get a meeting with trustees there and hoping for satisfaction. In Sharon, Greg Lubinetsky, Total News.
When the school bus arrived at Sharon Public School just north of Toronto, it signaled yet another attempt by Linda Till to enroll her daughter Becky at the school. 15-year-old Becky is a victim of cerebral palsy, and all efforts to start Becky in class here have met with stout rebuttal from the York Region School Board. Today, Becky and her family were surrounded by a boisterous group of friends and supporters. The occasion even qualified for a protest song or two. Then the big moment arrived, as Becky and her mother Linda Till slowly paced their way to the school's front door. The school board, backed by Ontario Education Minister Sean Conway, want Becky educated at a special ed school in Holland Landing. But Mr. and Mrs. Till, who adopted Becky from a nursing home 4 years ago, want her to be a part of the community in Sharon and the village school. But school principal Jean Page refused to budge.
Are you going to do as I've asked? Obviously not.
After lengthy discussions inside the school, the Tills left, and Linda Till faced up to the reality of continuing her struggle another day.
Are you distressed by today's turn of events?
Distress. I mean, I would love for somebody at some point in time, hopefully today and preferably even yesterday or the day before, to have said, you know what, we'll give it a try.
Moments later, the first of 3 York Regional Police cruisers called to the scene arrived. But the police, some of them apparently sympathetic to Becky's cause, were not anxious to take any action. Meanwhile, Linda Till had promised her daughter a day in school, and she was determined to keep her promise by setting up a desk on the front lawn of the school.
You do it. That's it. And I'll start you. Color it up.
Eventually, the police left, and Education Director Bob Cressman also departed without comment. The fight over Becky Till's education is by no means over. Next week, Becky's parents will take their campaign to the York Region School Trustees in a bid to force a political change of heart. Paul Dolby for Global News in the village of Sharon.
She can't go to class. Becky's parents are fighting that decision made by the York Region Board of Education because they feel Becky's ability should come before her disability.
We're on the line. The rights of our children are on the line.
Becky Till's friends were out in force this morning to show their support for the vibrant 15-year-old's bid to go to her local school. Becky has spent most of her life in a nursing home. She has cerebral palsy, which affects motor coordination. But thanks to people who see beyond her severe disability, she now enjoys a full life outside school. Even though she uses a wheelchair, Becky water skis and is active in Girl Guides. The York Region Board of Education says Becky is developmentally delayed and needs someone working with her on a one-to-one basis, and she can't register in grade 8.
We feel that we have a young lady with multiple needs that can be best addressed in the way that we as a board are providing for.
Beth French with the Canadian Association for Community Living says segregation is the worst way for a disabled child to learn.
As long as they're excluded from typical and ordinary experiences in life and excluded from community, especially community schools, they're going to be treated differently.
Becky and her mother Linda were turned away from the school again today. Principal Jean Page called police to clear supporters off school property. Linda Till says she hasn't given up the fight. Although her daughter needs help to do most things, she points to other school boards which are providing support services for disabled children.
Although the Tills remain committed to their goal, they left the grounds today as they agreed it's unfair for the battle to be fought at Sharon Public School when the real problem lies with the York Region Board of Education. So starting Monday, that's where supporters of Becky Till's right to attend her neighborhood school will be focusing their energies. Kate Wheeler, CFTO News, Sharon.
That is Lauren Matalon reports. While the Tills are fighting their case, there are schools accepting students just like Becky.
Okay, Becky, go.
The Tills were at Queen's Park to say Becky's life is threatened each day she's not allowed into school.
What I don't seem to understand is we're not just seeking a class in a local school. What we're seeking is a way to protect her life, literally protect her life.
Okay, Christine, how does Erica communicate with you?
At St. Anselm's School in East York, a Metro separate school board school, they're happy to have 15-year-old Erica Bodo. Bodo is unable to speak, but she communicates with her facial expressions, much the way Becky Till does.
All right, maybe Erica's contributing something right here. All right, so maybe she's saying something that we don't understand right, but she's trying to get that across to us.
Out on the basketball court, Erica's classmates told us Erica's presence has made for a better class.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it changed a lot of our attitudes towards each other and towards other people.
She changed my attitudes, and now I think much highly of them, the physically challenged.
Erica's mother told us she believes Becky Till would benefit from a regular class.
Erica's in a wonderful, wonderful situation. When we met the principal, he wanted to meet her. He came over to our house the next day and said that she belongs in his school because she lives in his neighborhood.
To sit yourself right down so you don't bounce out of my lap. I know.
As for Becky Till, the case is being investigated by the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Tonight, Linda Till is just hoping the York Region Board of Education changes its mind before the case is heard.
Well, we're going to go to a restaurant for lunch and you get to pick anything you want.
Lauren Matalon, CBC News, Toronto.
For Community Living and the Integration Action Group have stepped up the pressure on the provincial government. CFTO's Mitzi Benjamin reports.
Becky Till's family has been fighting an uphill battle with the York Region School Board. They've been trying to get Becky enrolled in her neighborhood school to learn among her peers. Becky has cerebral palsy and was confined to an institution most of her life. And though she has no difficulty communicating, she has been turned away 4 times from Sharon Public School. School officials say they can't accommodate Becky's needs, and children with severe disabilities must attend a segregated class. However, some organizations within the community don't agree, and they have joined forces with the Tills to put pressure on the province to amend the Education Act and introduce changes to the policy they say discriminates against the handicapped.
I believe that it is unjust to ask parents to move from one region of this province to another in order to access education in a neighborhood school in a regular classroom with regular kids. It is unjust to ask parents to change their religion and go to the other public system that happens to be Catholic. It is unjust to have families have to go to court.
I could use words like outrageous, disgusting, and embarrassing. It's time for the Ministry of Education in Ontario to say that an apartheid policy of education for children labeled mentally handicapped is not acceptable in 1989.
The Ontario Association for Community Living has requested a meeting with the Minister of Education. In the past, the Ministry of Education was prepared to step in when the same school board refused access to refugee children. Till supporters now say if the ministry turns its back on this issue, it will be condoning an illegal and discriminatory act. Mitzi Benjamin, CFTO News.
2 youngsters and their parents enter. The children are 15-year-old Becky Till, who has cerebral palsy, and 11-year-old Jocelyn Rowett with Down syndrome. Both children were denied entry into their local community schools in York Region, and both are fighting for a normal education. There was high emotion at the rally in support of these youngsters and others facing similar roadblocks. Some of the community college students who took part in the rally are themselves disabled.
As part of the Humber College student body, I've been able to fulfill my dream to become a social service worker.
I'm sure you were as surprised as I was to hear about the difficulties these 2 girls were having. Since a couple of years ago, I thought we were given the right to have education the way we wanted, no matter who we were.
The parents of Jocelyn and Becky were clearly gratified by the outpouring and support from these students.
It's incredible, and I hope that everything you're doing today goes beyond these walls and goes through the province of Ontario, right through the world. So,
fortunately, in most ways, Jacqueline is accepted in her community, except that one place, and that's her local public school. And that's the discrimination we're fighting right now in the courts.
Later, at a news conference, it was pointed out that integrated education for the disabled is achievable, that money is not a roadblock, but attitudes have to be changed. In Toronto, Ed Doyle, Newsroom 11.
Linda and King Till are trying to convince the York Board of Education that their daughter belongs in a regular classroom. The Tills were given a 15-minute closed-door meeting with the board to discuss their daughter's education. They presented the board with research supporting integration.
It was difficult to gauge whether what kind of response people were inclining towards. There was opportunity only for two questions from trustees, and they insisted that we keep within the 15-minute time frame, so there was no opportunity for other queries from any other trustee.
The board has said that Becky belongs in a special classroom. Their final decision could come tomorrow morning.
Into a regular classroom. The board wants to put Becky in a segregated classroom in a different school with other handicapped children.
The people who came out to the York Region School Board meeting say they want the trustees to know that it's not just 1 or 2 families with handicapped children who want them put into the regular classroom. There were neighbors, friends, and supporters from many different areas who think that Becky should be welcomed into her neighborhood school.
Obviously, it makes an able-bodied child feel that that there is a problem, that they shouldn't be allowed to come to school, and my daughter doesn't understand that. She cannot understand why Becky, who she knows and has known for a few years, cannot go to a regular school.
It's been an ongoing fight, and the relationship between the family and the board has become adversarial. The board agreed to give the Tills 15 minutes to make their case at a closed-door session before the public meeting. The Tills asked the board to postpone their final decision on placing Becky.
The question, I think, at this point is not whether we will integrate, but indeed when and how. And I'm hoping that the when and how will be soon and very well.
But it appears that the York region is not prepared to change its mind. This press release saying Becky would be in a segregated classroom was prepared before the meeting even began. Becky's case is not the first time the York Region has disagreed with parents about how their handicapped child should be educated. Katie Lewis's family is fighting segregation of their daughter before the Human Rights Commission. And Jacqueline Rowett's family is taking the board to court. They say their daughter is entitled to the same education as any other child under the Charter of Rights. Marlene Trotter, Global News, Aurora.
There's a similar case raging in Ottawa. It's a battle over whether to integrate a boy who has Down syndrome into the school system there. Linda and Jerry Boujol tried unsuccessfully to register their son Danny into D. Roy Kennedy School. The Boujols are taking the Ottawa Board of Education to court, citing Danny's constitutional rights.
Today, Becky's parents say they want to educate board members. Kevin Quinn explains.
Becky Till is not in school today, and she won't be in school tomorrow.
Hopefully no more than a month.
At a York Region Board of Education meeting last night, trustees were asked by Linda and King Till to attend a seminar on integrated education before deciding where Becky should go to school.
And we would offer that at our expense and our energies to pull it together for them. And we would do that within this month, and after that opportunity to learn about integrated education from the experts, ask them to then make a decision, which would hopefully be a very responsible decision.
The board declined the Tills' request for now. While no one at the board office would talk to us on camera, a prepared statement said, the board is deferring any consideration of a seminar until legal issues being pursued by the Tills are resolved. Linda Till is not sure what those legal issues are.
We haven't taken them to court. Are they telling us they want us to take them to court? We haven't, and we had no intention of taking them to court. There is no argument whatsoever to not hearing this information.
The Tills have filed a complaint with the Human Rights Commission, but they want to keep a dialogue with the board open.
We want to resolve this, and I would hope that the board wants to resolve this too. So I think the first thing we have to say is, board, we need to meet again.
In Sharon, Kevin Quinn, Total News.
Live from Kitchener-Waterloo, the home of Oktoberfest, the Deanie Petty Show on location.
I'd like you to meet Linda and King, who are parents of Becky Till, and I'm going to show you this picture of Becky. Becky is a little child right in the middle. You see her? So Becky is now 15. Has Becky had any formal education at this point? What has happened with her schooling?
In the last 4.5 years, where there's been something like 44 months of eligible school time or something to that effect, she's been in school 18 months, only a few months each year type of thing, and every single one of those months was in a segregated setting.
You've now decided you want Becky in a regular class. You have gone to the school. You made a presentation to the trustees. You've said this is what we want, and they have said to you, I am sorry, but we do not feel Becky belongs in the school. We'd like her to stay in the segregated school. And you're now taking this to the Human Rights Commission. You're going to challenge this.
That's right. We didn't just now, however, decide that we wanted her in a mainstream environment. From day one, very first day we approached our board, right, with them not knowing anything about Becky. The principal that we went to didn't know anything about her. And we said, we have a child now. We would like her to be registered in this school. This is her home school. And right, it was no from the moment they learned that she had a disability. It wasn't a question of who she was, what she was like, what her particular needs were, nothing. It was no.
Did they give you a reason, or they just no? That's our policy and that's it?
That's the way. We do not integrate those kids in our school system, period.
As you went through it, surely you realized, and did you at that point realize we were going to have this huge fight ahead of us? That you didn't think of that part,
no,
huh?
We had reason to be alert to the fact that the board would be reluctant.
Right.
Because in my work experience in connection with that board and other families in our area, I knew that they were reluctant. I just figured if we put all the facts on the table and we approached them in a really reasonable and realistic way and said, okay, here's the child, here's what she can do, here's what she needs, and this is why this kind of environment would be in her best interests, we'd be able to work. What was the most startling thing was that they said no before they heard any of that information. No. We've had to weigh the risks of her going back into a segregated system, which we believe is not only inappropriate, and it's important to understand the difference. We believe it's not only inappropriate, but also that it is incredibly harmful.
How could it be incredibly harmful to Becky?
Incredibly harmful in this way. We've got a little girl who's got very significant developing language. We put her into an environment where none of the children talk, or we put her into an environment where none of the children are able to get up and walk and interact with her when she's got these wonderful social skills to interact with other kids and to learn and model from other kids in their learning styles and their social skills. We put her into an environment where the other kids may perhaps have behaviors which are atypical behaviors. Those kinds of experiences are harmful experiences to a child who has all this developmental potential that's not getting an opportunity to be exposed to normal, regular development of regular kids.
When you look into Becky's future, and I know you must have given this a lot of thought, what is it that you would like her to achieve through this educational process, and what do you see in her future? What kind of things are there for Becky?
Down the road, she's obviously going to have to live in the community and be accepted in the community. The school environment is just part of that community, and she's going to learn from it, learn within it. The kids that are there are going to learn. Right. That the whole thing is a learning process. School is a way that children and young adults learn to socialize together. They learn about job opportunities and all that educational process. Right. So it's just a matter of getting her in and learning there, and then going on from there.
But in an educational sense, do you actually expect Becky does Becky have the ability to graduate from grade 8, from grade 6, from high school? I mean, what do you see here?
Becky has the ability to graduate from high school. Becky has the ability to graduate from college. Becky's already been invited to attend Humber College when she's old enough to go. The difference is that we need to talk about modification of the curriculum in order to enable her to achieve it. It is probably so, although I hate to be one who makes statements in advance that restrict her abilities, because people have done that all her life and she's proven every one of them wrong. It's probably so that she will have difficulty handling the full regular curriculum, but we also have been told that she can do, and we felt all the way along that there might be something to that, and yet even this kid with all the significant disabilities that she's had has learned to do such things as water ski. And I've got a picture for water skiing. What we're talking about is adapting and supporting. All right. Okay, when we adapt and support, this kid, as with any other kid, can make it all the way through every educational system.
In the province of Prince Edward Island, there are 25,000 students between grades 1 and 12. 1,000 of these students have learning disabilities. Only 400 are physically or mentally handicapped, and there are only 12 children in the entire province who are multi-handicapped. There is another side to the story, even from the parents' perspective. This is Teresa, who has a 34-year-old daughter who has a mental age of about 4 or 5. That's right. Do you feel that these children should be integrated into the system, these children with special needs?
Not my child, no. She wouldn't be able to cope at all.
Now, I said to you that they do, in many cases, supply attendants for these children with special needs. There's a cost to this.
Yes. There is a definite cost to it. And I think the government is supporting it, but I do feel that the children would be better off with people of their own category.
I'd like you to meet our guests. This is Mr. George Flynn, who is now the Chief Executive Officer of the separate school board for the Kitchener-Waterloo area. And in from Vancouver, Dr. Jean Moore, who is the Director of Student Services for the school board out there. Now, in Vancouver recently, Jean, you actually closed down a segregated school, and you took how many students out of there, and you've integrated?
We had, last June, when the school closed, 30 students left. And those young people are now all in schools throughout Vancouver. But in addition, we had been integrating a number of children with special needs prior to the closing.
Now, some of the children you were telling me about have very, very severe problems. I mean, you have children on respirators, you have children who need full-time attendance in the school system with them?
Yes, we do. We have them in our regular schools, regular classes.
Do you know what's interesting? You were mentioning, and I think a lot of us, when you recall, and I remember the school I went to, and somebody I know was telling me about the school you were in the 50s, and there was always the class for the special kids, and you knew that those kids, and they got a label. I mean, those were the stupid kids.
What is integration? See, what do we mean by integration? In our view, it's not doing something to a child or a group of people who have been resisted or rejected so far. In our view, it's creating a system so that everybody naturally belongs.
John has a child who has special needs. You have a Down syndrome child named Karen. And Karen is in the separate school board system?
That's right, yes.
Okay. We were talking about, the question is, and so a lot of people in this country feel, and a lot of intelligent people, I mean, these are people who've given this a lot of thought, who've said, no, just a minute. The best thing for these children is that they should be over here because they can get more attention and they can get everything they want. What is wrong? What would Karen lose, John, if she were segregated?
Oh, I think she would lose a lot of things. First of all, I think she would lose the natural peer interaction. Karen learns a great deal by modeling, by imitating other people, by imitating her brothers and sisters, by imitating her neighbors and her friends. And by being segregated with kids who don't speak or who are just have the same disability that she does, she won't have an opportunity to model. I think it's important to emphasize, though, that other kids would lose too. It's not just what Karen would lose, but it's all those so-called regular kids who would lose by not being in touch with Karen.
Well, the fear that we're talking about, the fear of putting your, quote, regular child with special needs children, are parents afraid of this in some sense?
No. As a matter of fact, my experience has been that the parents have said, why haven't they been in here before? Why is it that your special needs child is now coming to our school? Why haven't they been here all along? What has held you back?
One of the big problems that a lot of people have is, all right, got all these, quote, regular kids. You put this child in, or one or two in this class, and you're taking away. I want my child, and my child's going to go to university. This child is not going to go to university. I want my child to learn reading, writing, arithmetic, and you're taking away from my kid.
Well, we have to do two things there. One, in my point of view, we have to deal with the parent who thinks that reading, writing, and arithmetic are still the basics. They're not. The basics for the 90s are number one, human relations, number two, problem-solving, decision-making, number three, data management. Very little to do with reading, writing, and arithmetic.
All right.
So I would deal with them on that level. Second thing is to try to prove to them, as Mother Teresa said, this is difficult to talk to you about and prove anything. You have to come and see it. I think what I would want to do is take those parents by the hand and say, come with me and let's experience this together.
All right.
I'll tell you about it first, then I want you to come and see it, because the proof is in what you see.
And indeed, as they were saying, you really do have to see it in action.
You get nice feedback from the parents of the regular children about their children's experience with other kids?
Oh yes, they appreciate their children learning, and the children bring it home to the parents as well. It's the new generation are almost teaching the parents to be accepting when they bring home their little friend who happens to have a handicap.
And parents will say, just a minute here. We can't let this one kid disrupt the whole class. And that's the same concern that parents have with somebody who really has problems. How disruptive is it going to be? And can you guarantee me that it isn't?
Yes, I can guarantee that by providing the appropriate supports. And I think the parents have a right to have that guarantee.
Linda, you had something you wanted to say?
I just think it's really important from my perspective to ask this question. If the child that we were talking about being kept out of the regular school and being required to attend a school just with her own kind was a child that was black, or was a child that was native, or was a child that was redheaded, or was a child that had had an operation versus a child that hadn't had an operation, would we ask the same question about whether or not she should be there, whether there are any reasons at all that that child shouldn't be welcomed into that school community? The critical thing for me is to make sure everyone understands that my daughter is not less valuable than any other kid in the school. Not more valuable, but not less valuable, and therefore every effort must be made to ensure she is fully welcomed and included just as much as any other kid is.
You please applaud. You were going to go ahead. Okay. Well, what do you think after all?
I agree thoroughly.
I'd like you to meet Dr. Marcia Forrest. Dr. Forrest, you are very, very committed to these children. You have established a center to teach educators about integration.
The trick and the challenge is to change the regular education system to a quality education system for all children that meets the need of anybody that walks in the door, be it Becky Till or Judith Snow.
The key factor is trying to discover what that person's gifts are, not what their problems are.
See, I'm not even interested in integration. I'm interested in good education.
All right. We have Brian Cullen joining our panel. Brian is the principal of St. Francis School in Kitchener, Ontario. And 3 years ago, your school decided to fully integrate all of their students. Now, you hope that eventually a generation of young people will integrate naturally and that they will accept these other children. Now, were you nervous at all or worried at all about the prospect of fully integrating your school?
Absolutely. There's the fear of the unknown for any particular venture, whether it be in education or in business. There's always a part of that. I'm sure I was just as afraid of working on this initiative, or maybe fearful as Bob is sitting in the booth there. But it's something that's possible. I have a wonderful staff, many of whom are here tonight. We have a number of students who are here with us tonight, and we've now entered into a new mode of education. It's needs-based education, where we can all work together and problem solve around issues such as this.
I think it's really important that people need to understand, right from square one, that we are not talking about taking Becky and dumping her in a class of kids and asking the teacher to spend all her time with Becky. We are not asking the teacher to be dumped on. There isn't another person or another type of person other than parents who are more inclined and absolutely determined. We're going to want our teachers supported. We know our teachers are good teachers. We know they can only do a good job if they're doing a good job for all kids. But we also know, absolutely, without a question, that a school will become a better school if it can accommodate the differences of my daughter, and a teacher can become a better teacher if they can learn, and those resources are available.
My daughter is getting exactly what Linda Till is looking for her daughter. My daughter, I feel, has a lot more needs than Linda's daughter does. She is fully integrated. Full integration does not mean 100% sitting in a classroom. It means being part of the classroom, being a member of that classroom, and having an appropriate program and the appropriate supports. And that's exactly what she's getting in her board. She is getting all the resources necessary. The parents of the other children have expressed to me several times that they are so pleased with what their children are coming home and saying, and they are not losing any education whatsoever.
You wanted to make a comment?
Yes, I'm Pat Worth. I'm the president of a self-advocacy movement called People First in Canada, and we are all for integration. Our membership are people who have been labeled as mentally handicapped who have suffered nothing but a life of segregation in their lives, and has led to a life of misery because they're judged as people who can't learn. People judge me as a person who can't learn. I was in segregated classes most of my life, and I wasn't able to learn how to read and write. But it wasn't because I wasn't able to learn, it's because I wasn't taught to learn. And you know, if the education of a teacher is not over yet, if a teacher decides that a person can't learn.
Hello. I'm legally blind like one of your earlier panelists. My name is Susan Forster, and I'm president of a self-help group for people who are visually impaired and blind in Ontario called Boost. It is possible. It can be done. And I've got 3 university degrees and a full-time job, so you can do it.
Now, your kids here, had exceptional students in their classroom, and what was their initial reaction?
Their initial reaction? Probably the same as mine, a little bit of fear. We didn't know what to expect. We weren't too sure.
But when you hear Bob, let's just talk about Bob for a moment. We can't forget about Bob just because he's in the booth there. Now, when you hear Bob saying that he's worried about his other kids, that he's not managing to get around to them, how do you as a teacher manage?
Because I have kids helping kids.
Great.
What we have found is this. Kids do want to help. Yes. No matter whether they are good students, weak students, whatever kind of student, they want to help. And they will help. They'll do more for their friends than I can.
Hi. I've been labeled for a long time of being slow, being retarded, being all kinds of things. And when I hear teachers, say about their tax paying thing, it costs you $40,000 a year to lock me up. It costs you thousands and thousands of dollars to keep arresting me. And guess what? When I did get some education, it cost me $450 with a volunteer tutor. So you got a game to play.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'd just like to say that integration does work. I'm totally blind, and right now I'm in grade 12, the secretary on the student council involved in the drama program at my school.
All right.
Just one more thing. The key to all of it is support, though. Support from the teachers, you know, teachers, family, friends, everyone. You have to have a lot of support.
What is out there? I mean, what about funding?
Well, that's the bottom line, really. You know, we keep hearing that government is not a bottomless pit as far as money is concerned, and that's the key thing. So there has to be time to find the money to make the process work. But goodwill is the bottom line. I think goodwill is even more important than money, because sometimes things can be done to promote integration that don't cost much money.
Okay, now, I want you to meet May. May said she had something that she wanted to say. Okay, honey, what is it you wanted to say?
I agree with Marsha and agree with the red and white dress.
The girl in the red, oh, you mean Linda. Okay, you agree with Marsha and Linda. You think that everyone should be together. Okay, now these are some of the kids from your class who have been with you in elementary school, right? What was it like having May in the class?
It was great. May couldn't have done it without us, and we couldn't have gone through it without May. We were together.
School doesn't have to be all books, it can be friendship too. In May's class, our education didn't suffer, but we learned more.
You really feel that?
Yep.
Okay, what about you?
Well, like, I'm in grade 11 now, and we had a girl in our class, and like, so what? She needed help almost all day. I needed help in math, I needed help in science. Like, you're not gonna suddenly fail for giving a couple minutes out of your day to help somebody.
Well, I was just thinking, like, if Bob was saying that he had 4 children who act up, lots of people act up, but they don't have to be segregated. They're still in the classroom. Even though they act up, they waste time.
My younger sister, was in a class with a boy who had CP. He was in a wheelchair. And every day she would come home and tell us all about what he had done and how she had helped him. And she was like tons happier. And her grades went up 100% because she wanted to work as hard as he had to work to do well in school.
Okay, I wanted to hear, we've talked about the children all through the program, and I thought it was only right to end with the children. I thank all of you.
I think the trend is irreversible. This whole movement came out of the human rights movements of the 60s. It's not going to back up. It's not going to go away.
Right.
It's going to continue until we have recognized fully the rights of every living human being.
After years of battling to get Becky Till into a normal classroom setting, the accomplishment finally came.
Today, Becky started class at the Sacred Heart Catholic School in Newmarket.
Now, that may not seem like an extraordinary feat to most of us, but it's a triumph for the 15-year-old from Newmarket, Ontario. She has cerebral palsy, and like dozens of other disabled children across the country, hasn't been allowed to go to a regular high school. Until today. Kate Wheeler reports.
Tomorrow is Becky Till's 16th birthday, but today the young girl who has cerebral palsy got a present she has wanted for years. She was allowed to go to school and attend regular grade 9 classes with other children. But the present is bittersweet because it's not the local neighborhood school Becky wants to attend. That school doesn't want her. Becky's parents have been fighting an uphill battle with their local public school board for the last 4 years. It won't register Becky because she is developmentally delayed, and the board requires her to be placed in a segregated class. The Tills filed a complaint with the Human Rights Commission more than a year ago. It still hasn't been heard. Although the Tills aren't Catholic, they applied to their local separate school board, which believes in integrated classes. Today, Becky joined the other students for day 1 of the semester at Sacred Heart Catholic School.
Finally, somebody is saying, we want your daughter. Not, we're frightened of her, no way she can come here, not her kind, no, she can't, these things, but we want her. She's welcome, and we're excited to have her. I'm happy that she's in school. I'm not happy that the public board, which has a legal obligation to provide her education, has failed to do so and continues not to do so.
I think it's good to give her an opportunity in a normal school, and I'm really glad to have her in this school.
Director of Education with York Region's Public School Board, Bob Cressman, says he has no comment on Becky going to a separate school board school.
It provides the opportunity for students, for mentally and physically handicapped students, to come here and to be integrated into regular classrooms. We're committed to a program which involves mainstreaming.
The board is still investigating the complaint, but the NDP's education critic thinks the York board is wrong.
Are we talking about a society where we want to shove the disabled aside and put them in institutions again like we used to do in the old days? No, we're talking about integrating them in the workplace. Well, if we're going to integrate them in the workplace, then we should integrate them in the school as well.
But even though Becky has been accepted into a high school, her mother says the battle isn't over.
Her coming here is not the end of the story. You know, this is something that she has to have. She has to have school. Our board has chosen a response to our efforts, which is to ignore us completely. And they've just simply not only ignored us, but in the ignoring us, they've ignored Becky. And I think they've ignored their obligations to providing for her as well. It's not discouragement. It's outrage that the board that I pay taxes to, that has a legal obligation to provide for Becky, not only hasn't, but won't even listen, won't even try. It's a wonderful, wonderful treat to have people who are excited about her being here and are concerned about her versus the kind of experiences we've had where people have been so frightened about what it is we're seeking, or so over-focused on, you know, the particular challenges that she has, that they dismiss her.
Linda Till says that the issue of integration is too important to let die.
It was never an issue of, just getting Becky into the school. It's an issue of injustice. And if I turn my back and walk away, then I see that strictly and simply as being walking away from injustice. And I think if you walk away from injustice, you perpetrate injustice.
Good luck, Becky.